tuned into our series with Kevin and Annette, exposing the horrors of the Catholic Church. Some of you are aware that my own mum, her mum was told that she was going to burn in hell if she had a baby out of wedlock, and the Catholics forced my mum into a forced adoption, which traumatized her from being a baby. And Russ here was traumatized by Dominican Catholic nuns, which we are about to get into. And Russ has also got his links down there. We've got the book Facing the Broken Healer Crisis, A Fire Tender's Journey Through the Healing Arts. And there's other books as well, Moments in the Death of a Flesh Mechanic, A Man Among Helpers. And he's got his anti-war song, and he's got his contact information down there as well. So a huge thank you for coming on, Russ. Before we get into what happened with the nuns then, what was your life like as a kid?
As a kid, well, I want to start off thanking you for this. This is a real opportunity for me because I'm going to be dead soon, and I'm 74 years old now, and I've been in a process of really going into a life review, and mostly focused around what do I still have left to offer. So to be honest with you, the lead into this was I was attracted to the work that you were doing with Kevin and Annette, right? Is that correct? Yeah. And I started watching those podcasts, and it brought me back to a time in my life that I hadn't really looked at for quite some time, and as clickbait to attract you, I told you a little bit about my story, about my childhood experience with Dominican nuns, and that attracted you. But my larger goal is to make use of everything that I have, that of which, that's a part of it. Now it's receding into the background quite a bit, but in that process, I rediscovered some work that I had done that turned out to be a very good thing for a lot of people. And we can go about that later. And so, what I usually say is many, many, many years ago, my parents came over to the United States from the old country to build a better life for themselves. So they left me in Brooklyn and took the boat back to Italy. And that's a metaphor. It's not actually the truth, but it's a metaphor for my childhood, because leading into your question is that as a child, I felt completely alone. I felt abandoned. And it was on multi levels, which you might say the experience in Catholic school was kind of like the icing on top, the bitter icing on top. But I was raised in my mother was touch phobic, so I didn't get breastfed. That probably started the whole mess off. And my father wasn't very present back then. My earliest remembrance of childhood is that I would go to bed and my parents would be yelling at each other downstairs, and it was overall tense environment. My mother was really well, she was kind of nuts. I'll tell you about that later. But yeah, I felt pretty much abandoned and alone. And then at 5 years old, I entered Catholic grammar school. And that's where the trauma is really cooked up. But overall, I grew up in fear. I grew up in abject fear. I was told that growing up in Brooklyn, Irish Catholic neighborhood, grew up in a Trump home, actually. It was Trump's dad. He took over these huge blocks and turned them into attached houses. And that's where I lived. And I was afraid of the kids on the block. I was told constantly that they were beneath me, beneath my class, not as sophisticated. So I feared them. I was not physically, I was physically, I would say, incompetent. I never really, well, I would say because at an early age, I kind of left my body from various forms of abuse, psychological and physical, with the nuns, not with my mom. Um, and leaving my body, I was completely out of step with physicality. So I didn't go out and run around with the other kids. And um, I lived across the street from a park, and the park was 3/4 concrete. Even the ball fields, which you couldn't really slide home because you would turn into a bloody mess. But I thought that there was a little section of it that had some trees and benches and stuff, and I thought all that stuff was imported. I thought that the normal way of being was asphalt and concrete. You know, every house had a big tree in front of it, but I was dissociated from that. So I grew up pretty much uh, in a state of fear, is what I recall. And it was a very isolated environment, which, you know, in the ensuing years, this is part of my nature, is to be a loner and to be my own best friend. But the early years were very tough. It took me, well, honestly, it took me until beginning college before I felt like I could socially mix in with other people and
Russ,
feel
Russ, let me just pause you there. Let's go over this a bit more slowly.
sure.
So at 5 years old, you go to the school with the nuns. What was your first day like?
That's great. My first day, my mother dragged me to the parochial school, and um, there was a concrete holding area, a yard, and the 1 through 8th grade, 1A and 1B, 60 kids in a classroom, and they would line up according to the class that they were in. So when I went in there, what happens is some kids get left behind. They don't make the grade the year before. And the kids that were left behind were instructed to go into the lower class level, lower class line, and they would fight. They would fight. They would go into the next class where all their friends were. And the nuns swooped down like a bunch of bats from hell and grabbed them by the ears, started slapping them, pushing them around, uh, traumatizing them, you know. And this was my first view. It scared the crap out of me. And that was the first day. That was the very start. My first grade when I was 5 years old was pretty good. In fact, one of the sisters there in charge of the choir she worked with me in choir and singing, and that became a direct line between me and God, between me and my higher power. And that has sustained me significantly through my life. But in sixth grade, everything changed. Sister Ann Robert um, took the liberty because I was deemed, at then IQ tests were very popular. And I had the third highest IQ in the class. So she took that opportunity to beat me every chance she could because I was lazy. So I would say a couple of times a month, I would get reprimanded and beaten, and this was through the whole school, especially
What methods did they use to beat you, Russ?
rulers, pointers, pull your pants down in front of the class, and hand slapping, you're pulling, stuff like that. I mean, just I look back at it, and that was just kind of a way of life. That you went into that atmosphere, and there they were, just picking on kids. The emotional abuse was rife. Insulting parents, everybody around you. The girls, there's girls and boys mixed in, but there was a kind of a wall between the sexes that you couldn't really cross. So normal development was kind of out of the question with that. And that lasted through the full 8 years. It went to a peak in sixth grade. I stuck my tongue out at a nun, and next thing nun after nun after nun, handing me from nun to nun to nun, beating me, pulling my ear, slapping, rulers, then down to the principal's office, and she beat me, with a pointer for a god-awful period of time. So much so that I had welts on my ass for a year. And I went home, and I told my mom, and I showed her the welts, and she grabbed me, and we went down to the convent. And then I sat in the vestibule. She went back there with the nuns. And then she came out about 15 minutes later and never said a word to me. Never said a word what happened, the confrontation she had with the nuns, nothing. And that's been a sore point, a very sore point in my life. That absence, I've always wondered, and I'll never have the answer, what did they tell her? She was a devout Catholic and believed all the hellfire and stuff. And, I think they probably threatened her with hell if she said anything about it or did anything more.
You got a question from a viewer, Marie.
Yeah.
Marie wants to know, what is a pointer? How is a pointer used?
A pointer in the old classrooms is just a simple round rod, wooden rod that is somewhat flexible, so it really snaps. I realized, it's interesting. As I got older, when I would get a massage, when they would get down towards my left cheek, I would uncontrollably flinch and tighten up and whatever. It took me years to realize. And then one day, while going through that therapy, I realized that was because they were mostly right-handed, and that was the cheek that took the most abuse, and it lives in you, it lives in you for a long time. So I would say the peak of my dissociation from my body was back then, started at 6 years old. I had to. I mean, I was getting beaten all the time. All the kids, all the boys were getting beaten. So, yeah, that kind of characterizes it. And the details of it, to me, have taken a real back step. I'd like to go into the blog that I started.
Okay, Russ. Before we go to your blog, I've just got a
Yeah.
few more questions about this time in
Sure.
your life, if that's okay.
Sure.
All right. So this school then, was it a school where you went in the morning and you came home in the evening, or was it a boarding school?
No. It was a day school.
Day
Classes.
school.
Yeah, I got out at 3:00.
All right. So you've described really well, and it's harrowing. You going in there your first day, and how the punishments got worse going into the next year. So, how did you adapt to that? Did you have any support from friends at the school? Was there anyone you could confide in?
No, absolutely not. I mean, it was a huge period of isolation and loneliness for all that time. Is it you didn't talk with each other about. I mean, people don't talk to each other about their trauma, period, in life, and it was no different back then, and even exacerbated by the youth and the insecurities of youth.
So, what was your game plan then? Were you just going in each day and just trying to get through the day without getting punished?
Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, I hated school. I hated book learning. I was bored most of the time. I was bored. The only thing that kept me going was a sense of self at my core, but that was personal between me and God.
And what about friends? You didn't have any friends at all?
Yes, kids on the block interactions, but I was bullied a lot. I was very insecure in so many ways. No, friends wasn't a real. I had like one or two friends over the course of those 8 years that I really, to me, a friend was the most valuable thing in the world. So like if I had someone who treated me kindly, then I latched on to him. I had a couple over the course of those 8 years, but not much.
So, are you saying that you were bullied at the school or after school?
Not so much at the school because there was tight discipline around. But after school, periodically. I mean, it wasn't all the time, but I mean, I felt bullied, by life. I felt insecure. I did not feel. I did not have a sense of personal empowerment, around that. So I was vulnerable.
And how many years of punishment did you go through with the nuns?
Well, from second grade till 8th grade.
And for the people of England, what are the ages of those grades?
Okay, well, this was um, well, I started early. I started at 5 years old, so 5 until 13, something like that.
Okay. So as you got older, then did the punishments differ?
Not really, not really, not really. What differed, I would say, would be my awareness that the nuns took glee in what they did. You know, you could see it in their eyes that they love beating up kids. And secondarily, is that no nun ever came to the defense. The nuns that weren't beating you were silent. So you went through this, you know. Just is just the way of being. You know,
Did you ever see
they
did you ever see other kids stand up to the nuns?
no, I saw kids run, run out of the school and then come back a few days later with their parents and very well behaved. You know, God knows how the parents got threatened.
What were the worst punishments, not just for you, but for other kids, perhaps?
Uh, it was pretty standardized. Whacked with the ruler, whacked with a pointer, whacked with a yardstick, slapped, ears pulled, uh, stuff like that was routine. I would say, yeah,
And
and
when they pulled your pants down in front of the class, I mean, that must have been really humiliating.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There were times when, we had Inquisitions. All right, I had one friend at the time, and we were out in. It was a very hot summer day, and we were running around town and overheated, absolutely thirsty. So he lured me into the back of the church, and in the church, they have the holder of holy water. So he went and he got down there and he drank a few gulps, and then he said, go ahead, do it." And I was scared to death to do it, but I did it. And then I knocked over the urn of holy water. And it was huge a scandal in the church because at that time, supposedly, you could not have holy water blessed by anyone but the Monsignor of the parish or the bishop. And so it turned into a huge inquisition where for a week they took the kids out into the hall, the boys especially, and they beat everyone up in the class with pointers, pulling their pants down, and until somebody gave it up. Nobody gave it up. I went to confession, and I told the priest the next week I got pulled out and I got busted,
Mhm.
and so then a whole another round of beatings.
Wow. Did the nuns ever bring priests in to who also did any abuse, or was they absent?
I never really saw that. The priests were like a whole different world, 20 nuns to a priest, something like that. Well, that's probably not quite accurate. I would say 10 nuns to a priest. And the major abuse, I never really, outside of the priest breaking the laws of the confessional, I didn't have many run ins with the priests.
Did you have to do a lot of religious education?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Indoctrination. and with hell always being held up and being told that you're going to go, if you chew the host, if you receive communion, chew the host, and you get hit by a car, right to hell. Stuff like that. So really, it took me, a good 14 years to unlearn everything that I learned in Catholic school.
So, what were the major things that happened to you over the years in Catholic school?
The major things?
Yep.
Indoctrination, physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse in terms of me learning to despise my manhood. The nuns made sure that the boys were not able to be men, I guess. And relationship with women, certainly that affected me my whole life through.
Could you explain what you mean by that? The nuns made sure the boys couldn't be men.
To have that natural energy, that natural drive, that natural curiosity, that natural rambunctiousness that kids have, that boys have especially, that was suppressed. If you acted like you were moving forward or even a little bit interested in girls or whatever, you were slapped. The abuse is the sudden disruption of your experience, and violent disruption of your experience. So when you were acting like a little boy, you got trounced on. What does that do? That means natural impulses are suppressed. You do it as a protective mechanism. It's inevitable.
As you're approaching teenager, do you start to rebel?
I'm not sure what you mean by rebel, because it certainly set me, well, yeah, okay. Respect for authority, gone. By the time I was 13 years old, respect for authority was gone, because these are God's representatives on earth, and they're pretty damn evil. So it's a part of my being now. My skepticism about authority. Anybody that comes towards me saying that they know best, or whatever. I mean, it's a defining characteristic of my life, and I love it. You know what I mean? The root, I have to say, that the basis of who I have become was set in those years. My whole life has been kind of overcoming that consistent attempt to strip me of sense of self, and it's defined everything I've done since. Looking back, I would say, well, it led me into a lifetime, a good 30 years in the human growth and potential movement, where a lot of that time was spent coming to terms with the childhood that I had to live through. And that's been a driving force. And it's helped me learn so much about myself and human nature that there's a part of me that's thankful. I mean, when I was a kid, I did not think that the world was anywhere worth going into. And so, but as I grew older, as I learned to make my way, overcoming the psychological blocks that I had and learning more about them, it drove me deep into understanding the human condition, and actively working in that my whole life. So basically, sculpting crap. You know what I mean? I mean, I've learned, yeah, that was my starting point, and that really formed my personality, and it put me on a lifetime path that had to do more with healing than it had to do with holding on to trauma.
So, Russ, you said that you viewed the nuns as God's representative on earth and that they were evil. So, did that make you question God?
Oh, certainly. Certainly. Except, I would say in the very early years, I got that connection. And I did recognize that the God that is a whole lot different than the God that was presented to me and jammed down my throat. And that has sustained me. In my lifetime, God has taken many, many different faces, and they've all been, all been good. It's been a driving force of my life. Relationship is good, and perhaps you could say because of that early adversity, um, it, uh, it strengthened my relationship and caused me to seek other faces of God. What's another side of this creator, this force that brought me into life? You know,
So, so throughout all of those years, then, when you were at the school with the nuns, did your parents just acquiesce?
oh yeah, yeah, very much. I mean, my father was, Showtime Catholic. He'd make a show for church on Sunday after being severely nagged by my mom. And my mother was completely involved in it to the point of abuse of uh, the whole family if they did not conform, did not embrace the church and all its teachings and all that. Yeah, it was pretty weird.
So, what was it like then, as you were at the age where you were about to leave this school?
Well, when I left the school, I grew up in Brooklyn. Then we moved out to Huntington, Long Island, and I went to uh, Walt Whitman High School. And I remember the first day of class, uh, they were doing the roster in the homeroom, and I was listening, and I heard all these names that I never heard before. And then as they're going down the list, and they get to Marshall Gimple, and I cracked up. I almost died. I had to cover my face. I had never heard many Jewish names in my early experience. So I put my head down on the desk, and I just laughed hysterically, muffling my sounds because I'd never heard anything as strange as that in my life. And my high school was a continuation of the insecurities that were drilled into me during grammar school. So high school wasn't really until the last year of high school that I started to have more of a presence. I had a couple of friends that close friendships that have lasted to this day, and that was a start.
But didn't the absence of the nuns in your new school enable you to decompress?
Well, the psychological burden, the being off balance, is something that what is this new world I'm into, and how do I navigate through it with all the insecurities that were drilled deep into me. So socially, it took me a long time to start to feel, like I belonged. I mean, that really didn't happen until after my first year in college. So it's you're traumatized. You can say PTSD, and it takes a long time to move into a selfhood that feels in sync with being a human being that is appreciated. That's a lifetime. It's a lifetime thing. I'm still doing that.
What did you study at college?
Oh, I studied the '60s. I, as a matter of fact, like in order to graduate grammar school, you had to have a 75 average, 75% average. I graduated with a 73 average, and they pushed me out. And the same was high school. That was my ending average, 73. I could not get into a regular college. I couldn't even get into my local 2-year college. And but I applied to the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, and I got in on the Yankee quota. In order for them to get their funding, they had to have X amount of Yankees in the school. So I get on that. So, like 1968, we're talking 1968. And in New York at the time, the hippies were becoming a fashion. And it was very superficial. You had a lot of kids on Long Island. We call them weekend hippies. They go to Greenwich Village, hang out, smoke dope, and then come back to their secure environment. And I was out of sync with that. I wasn't. It was like a fashion, so it wasn't working. So in 1968, I went to the University of Tennessee. 26,000 students, and there were 50 freaks in the whole school. So I got to live in an environment where I was a trailblazer. I was the vast minority that was trying new things. That was coffee houses and communes and all that sort of stuff. So I actually got to live that experience of what it felt like to be a real outsider in a movement that would define probably the future of America. So that was pretty cool. So obviously you can tell I kept some of those roots in me.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like you're saying what happened with the nuns shaped you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, totally, totally. And most importantly, it it put me on a quest. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean uh, to actively pursue a life that has value and is also worth pursuing? What does all that look like? And it's been a lifelong. It's from a background of trauma, and then the rest of it is not about recovery. It's about seeking more, understanding more, seeing what is the essence of this life, coming to terms with my relationship with God and self.
What were you guys saying about your blog?
Oh, all right, here we go. Excuse me. My throat's raw.
Okay,
Hold on one second.
you're fine. So all of Russ's links, folks, are in the description box. I mean, Russ, you said at the beginning you don't have much longer to live. You said that quite definitively. Is that, do you have a medical condition or something?
No, no. I'm 74. How long am I going to
People
last?
people live till 100 these days. Come on.
Well, the scary thing is that my family are long livers. Most of them are into their 90s. And all that, and that's great. Well, it's not that. It's just that I probably will get into it later. But I have a very intimate relationship. Thank you, Trevor. I have a very intimate relationship with death. I understand death completely. So I want to pick up. What was the last question you asked me before we got into that?
I was asking you about your blog, but now you've got me thinking you may have had some brushes with death.
Yeah. Like in high school. Well, it's in a broader context. You know what? I want to, if you'll let me, I'd like to finish the whole thing about the early development. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So let me tell you about in 2009. Okay, I was living on Maui. I think I was running a flop house at the time, and there was an article in the paper. It was talking about a bunch of Irish priests who got let off the hook for sexual abuse that they had done. And I read it, and I went back to my past, and I had seen all these incidences of priests getting busted for this and for that, but never really getting uh, treated appropriately according to their crimes and their evil. So I read this article and I just had a fit. I got so angry that I started a blog, a fire tenders blog. And I wrote, a couple of thousand words that described in detail my experience in Catholic school. And that with the angle that, like the nuns were the primary distributors of the abuse, that it was consistent through New York area everybody was treated that way in Catholic school. It was widespread. Everybody that I knew from other schools, we get together and we compare notes, and it'll be all about the beatings and the abuse and all that. So I wrote this blog, and to get it out of my system, and I described in detail all the things that we just discussed. And then I said, okay, fine, leave it alone. All right. I didn't really revisit it. About 3 months later, I saw that there were hundreds of comments, and they were from all over the world, of incidences of abuse at the hands of nuns, like Catholic nuns. And there were some horrendous stories, including deaths. There was quite a bit. As a matter of fact, in Britain, in your world, was the major reports of death. Irish, Scottish, and British orphanages and boarding schools, as you described. So as it's going and the respondents are more and more and more and more, the blog took on a life of its own, that people started helping each other. They started sharing their traumas. They started providing links for people to learn more. And it turned into a place of healing. Once I realized the direction it was going, then I did my best to facilitate it as time went on. So I did this, I worked actively at it for about 10 years. And what I found, I had respondents from the 40s, 50s, 60s, up until the 90s that were sharing these terrible stories of abuse. And they were all helping each other, lifting each other up. And a few things that I noticed. One was that I really thought that the majority of people that would be responding would be males, would be boys that had been abused. But it was equally, if not more, traumatic for the girls, for the women. And I had women from the 40s and 50s and 60s saying, I've never talked about this my whole life. You know, that was the directive. You just didn't talk about this. They had spent lives of insecurity and were sharing that for the first time with others. And the women were as equal with the men, and they were traumatized terribly by witnessing what these was happening to the boys. Now, one of the things that I ran into was that in 1980 they did a survey and they found that 80% of the people living in the United States started in Brooklyn, you know, in the New York area. So what I recognized was that abusive culture spread throughout the United States, and that trauma and that insecurity, those insecurities, like I had experienced, was rife throughout the United States, a cultural phenomenon. So at the end of 10 years, over 1,500 responses to that blog, and figure 500 different people. I mean, a lot of people coming back and helping others coming into the fold, and it turned into quite a phenomenon. So I had stopped involvement as it really grew. After about 10 years, after about 2019, my attention went, obviously into other areas. But when you started doing your interviews with Kevin, that reignited the whole thing, and it brought me back there, and it brought me to a deeper level of understanding about myself. And I'm very proud of that blog. Now, for then it was going viral. Now it wouldn't mean a thing. 1,500 responses is nothing these days, but I think it helped a lot of people. A lot of people embraced that experience.
What about you, Russ? Was that blog cathartic?
Well, it turned into a juggernaut, the catharsis was getting out my truth and condemning the church and being able to put it out there. But then from then on, once I saw that the response was so great, it became an integral part of my life to be able to learn more and to be able to provide a little bit more in service to those people who have been wounded, who never really had a forum for that. The focus was on what was going on with the priests and stuff like that. And this aspect I felt, and I still believe, that at that time, especially the 50s and the 60s, were like the peak of physical and emotional abuse. And thousands upon thousands upon thousands of children grew up in that. The blog was like from all 50 states and also from Britain, Mozambique, France, Germany, like all over the world, surprisingly. So what I learned is that was a culture, part of the culture. Abuse of children is deeply rooted into that. And the damage that it caused was terrible.
Russ, you've had a few viewer questions come in. Are you okay to answer some questions from the viewers?
I'll even take the hecklers.
All right. Well, if you are watching us live, please put your questions for Russ in now. So, Murray wants to know, has a class action lawsuit ever been considered?
I have no idea. There is a group that is dealing with the priests, and they've been doing that. But as far as the nuns, no, none that I'm aware of. None of the respondents, none of the respondents said that. Some threatened it, said let's do it, but it never went anywhere.
Steve wants to know, has Russ ever heard the testimony of Sister Charlotte? If so, any similarities or thoughts?
I'm not aware of her.
Okay.
That I know of. I may have run into that. How many Sister Charlottes are there?
Steve's also sent a follow-up question. Why do we tolerate the Roman Catholics? We all know the corruption and the control. They even call themselves P1 and P2 Lodge propaganda, and Lodge stands for Masonic Lodge. So do you think it's like there's good and bad in everything, isn't there, Russ? And it does seem to me that the Catholic Church is harboring a lot of evil, especially with the pedophile rings. And do you think, that people, it just seems it's in our faces that they do this, and they get these high-priced lawyers and they protect these priests, and it's quite disgusting. So what are your general thoughts on the Catholic Church now?
Well, here's what I'm learning, and Kevin has been pivotal. I mean, I've been really delving into your interviews with him, and I got into watching him because I have been noticing trends in politics and all that, and I was noticing a lot of name calling and a lot of blaming of certain classes of people that are not supposed to be mentioned these days. And I was steeped in with another podcaster and listening to his building case that these people with the funny hats are ruling everything. And I felt in my gut from I've been part of the American experience for 29% of America's history. That's a long chunk. And I've been skeptical of authority and been watching and tracking this for a good chunk of my life. And what I'm learning from Kevin is that religions, or so-called religions, or worshipers of God in various classes, are infiltrated with people that are working together to control the souls of people, to control the psyche and therefore the souls. So the Catholic Church now, I recognize that it is heavily laced with people that are into disrupting humanity, really sucking the humanity out of people, and that they're ruling the world. And I don't see it as one religion, just the Catholics. Kevin turned me on to the incredible degree that the Catholics have had control of money, control of psyche, control of politics, control of medicine, control of it all. Equally with that other group of people, even more so. And he got into the Mormons and all this sort of stuff. So what I'm saying, what that taught me is that the powers that shouldn't be have always used religion as a tool to increase their power and to subordinate the human being. And that's, I would say that's my fight now, is with the energy and the years that are left to me, I'm stepping forward in defense of humanity. And my life has been a quest to find out, what can I do? What can I do to do it? And this is a part of it. That's why I'm thankful for this opportunity, because I'm able to review my life, and also as an elder, to share for future generations what freedom means. I've been very fortunate to have built on a foundation of abuse and move forward in my life and turn it into something valuable, hopefully for the future. In fact, as I was preparing for this time with you, I was thinking, as a writer, because I've covered a lot of different areas, when you write as if you're talking to someone. You pick out a person, someone, and that's the voice that you give, so that it is a personal experience for whoever reads it, because you're talking to someone in particular. And I was thinking of Ziggy. I was wondering what in my life do I have to offer that would be valuable to him? Because he's going to be carrying the burden, so that's kind of a subtext to what's going on here. What I'm striving to do, Sean, is to make this personal and review my life as we go along and find out what are the things that I've experienced that are going to be valuable to the upcoming generations. That they need to hear, that they need to see, because they are going to be severely hampered in their humanity. And I wish I felt that there was an escape. I wish I felt better about the future, but I don't. But I do know what I can do to make a difference.
Well, we salute that mission. And Trevor wants to know, are the law scared of the nuns and the Catholics? Is there a shadow network protecting them?
I would imagine. Yeah, of course. I mean, because when you look at it, it's the elites who have permeated the church, and the elites, under the guise of a sacred mission, protect each other through the courts, through medicine, through everything is widespread.
Okay, well, you've answered all the questions, Russ. Is there anything you'd like to say in conclusion to the viewers?
Well, I hope to be able to get more exposure on the rest of my life and be able to share that with people. I want to make it clear that I have come to terms that this is the one part of my life that was traumatic, that has been turned into gold through a lifetime of effort. And that's what the focus should be. I saw a lot of people in the blog that were, they were talking to me at 70, 80 years old and going, my whole life has been crippled by this, and holding on to it. Said, well, it's not about survivor. It's not about survival for me. It's about turning something negative into something positive for others,
And we appreciate, having the bravery to come out here and tell us what you've been through and to use that for the good of the future generations. There could be nothing more, humanitarian than that I can think of. So we salute you, Russ, and viewers. All of Russ's links are in the description box as well. And I urge people to support your work. So thank you for coming on, my friend.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. I really appreciate the opportunity and look forward to a good future in this funny world we're in.
All right, cheers. I'm going to let you go and I'm going to close the show. So you take care.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ. Cheers. Thanks for tuning in, viewers, and thank you for your questions. And just to let you guys know what we've got coming up next. So Ron is back with the Royal Mess. That's going to be this evening at 7. Many of you have been waiting for Zachary King Part 2. He's the ex-Satanist. Really graphic. He was talking about the well, I best not say some of the ritual stuff he was talking about. It's too graphic. But anyway, all going well. Zachary King is going to be back at 8 o'clock tomorrow for Part 2. And then we've got Nathan Reynolds' Snatched from Hell coming up at the weekend. And on the 1st of July, we're back to some more World War III coverage. So a huge thank you for tuning in, everybody. And I hope to see you in some of the shows, some of the next shows. So get ready for the Royal Mass with Ron tonight, if that's